What's up, everyone, and welcome back to First and 15 Fantasy Football Podcast. As we continue to dive into the AFC West, we are now going to get into the Las Vegas Raiders. If you haven't already, please give us a like, comment, share, or even subscribe to our channel as we continue to give you the most effective information and strategies for your upcoming draft and season. Give us a follow on Twitter. Let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. And thank you for joining us. This is going to be another episode of Injury Outlook, looking into now the Las Vegas Raiders. We've been diving deep into the AFC West and some key acquisitions and trades that are happening to some of these teams. Now we're actually going to see what is going on with the Las Vegas Raiders. New head coach, some key players being added, some key players being traded, some injuries that plagued them last year, and then see if it's going to affect them this coming season. Without further ado, let's get into it. The Las Vegas Raiders finished the season with a 10-7 record. They're going to be adding some new key acquisitions, a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. They come by the ways of New England Patriots, so we're going to see if this offensive scheme is going to ultimately have some similarities to the New England Patriots, or is it going to ultimately take on a new shape. But some of these key acquisitions are going to definitely add to the offensive production for the Las Vegas Raiders. You're going to see hopefully an uptick in fantasy production from some of these key players. We did see some key injuries happen to some of these players that obviously affected their fantasy production from last year. We're going to see if they can bounce back from these injuries and then ultimately add to this season's production. Now let's transition over to the quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders, Derek Carr. Derek Carr was able to stay relatively healthy last year. He did not miss any games, and so that's obviously good on his part. We obviously don't want to see any significant injuries happening to some of these key players, but it was evident in some of this fantasy production that he did last year. He was able to complete a total of 428 completions at 4,804 yards. He did add 40 rushes at 108 yards, 23 pass TDs. And so right now he is ranking in your redraft leagues in your 15th quarterback overall. In some of your best ball leagues, he's going anywhere between your 6th and 7th rounds. And your Superflex leagues, he's going anywhere between your 2nd and your 3rd round. So depending on some of your ranking systems. But with Derek Carr, I anticipate that he is going to have, an uptick in his fantasy production from last year, depending on kind of the offensive scheme of what Josh McDaniels and Lombardi want to bring. As you'll notice that in the New England Patriots scheme, there was a lot of running back community and not too much of offensive production when it came to the wide receivers. But again, with the likes of Devontae Adams, we're going to see if that ultimately changes Derek Carr's outlook and fantasy production for this season. Let's continue on, and now let's get into the Las Vegas Raiders running backs. We're going to be talking now about Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs did miss 2 games last year. He did have what we call a toe ankle sprain. He did suffer that in the week 1. We did take a look at it, and we did a video analysis to anticipate how many games he would be missing. We did anticipate anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, and he did miss exactly 2. And so he did have a chest contusion in week 7, but did not miss any games from there. That did eat into his fantasy production, but not too much significantly. He did have a total of 217 rushes, 872 yards, adding 54 receptions at 348 yards. He did add 9 rush TDs to his offensive production last year. Now, with the new offensive scheme, especially bringing over Josh McDaniels and Lombardi and the New England Patriots scheme, you'll recall that that's more of a running back committee. And during the offseason, they did have some key acquisitions that are going to add to the running back depth chart for these Raiders. So we're going to ultimately see if this offensive production for Josh Jacobs is going to continue, or is it going to maintain or even lower a little bit, dependent on who these key acquisitions and the running back positions are going to be added to the Raiders team. The other notable running back for the Las Vegas Raiders was Kenyan Drake. As you recall, last year he did suffer an ankle fracture that put him out the rest of the season. However, it did affect him for his offensive fantasy production for last year. He did miss a total of 5 games due to that ankle fracture. That ankle fracture was done in week 13, missing again a total of 5 games. He did add before that 63 rushes at 254 yards, 30 completions or 30 receptions at 291 yards with 1 reception TD and 2 rush TD. So he was adding and supporting Josh Jacobs and that Raiders offensive production and that running backs. Now that you have the addition again with Josh McDaniels and the committee, I believe that you're going to continue to see that workload offset. Now, there are some beat writers saying that Josh McDaniels absolutely loves the skill set of Kenyan Drake, specifically that he can go out for passes and then ultimately run in between the tackles. So we're going to continue to see what that training camp unfolds and then ultimately see how Kenyan Drake is progressing. He did have off-season surgery, and that was done in December of last year. It takes anywhere between 4 to 6 months, depending on whether it's specifically just an ankle fracture or was there tendons, ligaments torn that needed repair. Either way, it's going to take 4 to 6 months to return to play. I believe he will remain healthy throughout this offseason, continue to make progressions through the preseason, hopefully have no setbacks, and be ready for that season opener. Peyton Barber and Jalen Richard are the other key notable running backs for the Raiders. No fantasy relevancy considering last year's production, but able to stay relatively healthy this year. Both Peyton Barber and Jalen Richard are free agents this year, but they are adding some key acquisitions to that running back committee. Peyton Barber was able to, again, play in 16 games total last year, only missing 1 due to a toe injury in week 4. But he did add 55 total rushes at 212 yards, adding 2 rush TDs. Jalen Richard also added 9 rushes at 40 yards. So, again, no fantasy relevancy there. Again, with this, now with the free agency happening to Jalen Richard and Peyton Barber, we're going to see if the key acquisitions of Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden to this committee, if that's going to ultimately change the outlook of Kenyan Drake and Josh Jacobs. Now let's get into the Raiders wide receivers. As a key notable wide receiver is Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow was able to play in all 17 games last year. So again, another significant feat for him, considering that he did have a rib fracture in November of 2019. And so no significant injuries there, evident in his fantasy production last year. He added 103 receptions at 1,038 yards, also adding 9 reception TDs. With the addition of Davante Adams, and now with the trading of Zay Jones, Bryan Edwards, we're going to see if that ultimately opens the door for Hunter Renfrow to continue to increase his fantasy production. But now, with the likes of Davante Adams and hopefully a healthy Darren Waller throughout the season, we're going to see if that eats into his targets. But again, we're going to see how that evolves over the season and as the season progresses. But right now, Hunter Renfrow is in your redraft leagues 41st overall, and in your best ball leagues, he's going anywhere between your 9th and 10th rounds right now in your best ball leagues. And so Hunter Renfrow is going to see if he's going to ultimately be your wide receiver 2 right behind your Davante Adams, and ultimately see if his offensive targets are going to change, considering now that you have Davante Adams in the mix. Again, the other wide receivers were Zay Jones, Bryan Edwards, and Henry Ruggs. Unfortunately, we know what happened to Henry Ruggs, and Zay Jones got traded over to Jacksonville, and Bryan Edwards got traded over to Atlanta. They were ultimately able to stay relatively healthy throughout the season. They did not miss any games between either one of them. Bryan Edwards was able to add 34 receptions and 571 yards last year, but he's going over to the team of Atlanta. And now again, you only have Davante Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and that running back committee, along with Darren Waller and Foster Moreau. So we're going to see if that ultimately that wide receiver committee is going to have that offensive production that we're looking for, and if ultimately Hunter Renfrow and Davante Adams are going to continue to have the same impact they had last year. The last group I want to get into is your tight ends for your Raiders. Darren Waller was able to finish the season off relatively healthy, but he did suffer a knee sprain or knee contusion that put him out several games. He did have an ankle injury or an ankle sprain on week 6, and he did miss 1 game. And then he had this knee contusion, this IT band strain in week 12 against the Cowboys, and missed 5 games. And it was evident in his fantasy production, kind of the games that he missed. He did add 55 receptions at 665 yards, 2 reception TDs. Right now, he's going in your redraft leagues for your 5th overall tight end. And in your best ball leagues, he's going anywhere between your 3rd and 4th rounds. And so very high. And so we're going to see if ultimately Darren Waller is going to stay relatively healthy this coming season and continue to increase his fantasy production. After looking at the analysis of the video, it was evident that he did suffer a knee contusion, or it did come off awkwardly during a tackle. But again, it was great to see that he was able to finish off the season strong and relatively healthy without any significant setbacks. We're going to see now with the addition of Davante Adams and now with the increased production of Hunter Renfrow, if these 3 key players are going to be ultimately have your offensive production for Derek Carr. Again, we're going to watch and see as this season unfolds, kind of seeing how this offensive scheme continues to revolutionize. But that will do it for your Las Vegas Raiders. A recap, you have your new head coach coming over from New England Patriots, an offensive coordinator. You have key acquisitions of Davante Adams. You have Demarcus Robinson. You have Amir Abdullah, and you have Brandon Bolden. You also have key acquisition rookies coming as Zamir White, and also Britton Brown, a running back from UCLA. So we're going to see some of these key acquisitions, and obviously with the addition of Davante Adams, that's going to change the outlook of this team. We're going to see how this unfolds with Derek Carr's offensive production, and then the outlooks of Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. But that's going to do it for another episode of Injury Outlook, looking into your Las Vegas Raiders. This is Carlos with First and 15 Fantasy Football Podcast. If you haven't already, please give us a like, comment, share, subscribe. Share us your thoughts. What do you think about Darren Waller and Davante Adams and Hunter Renfrow? Is the offensive scheme and production going to change from last year? Stay tuned for another episode, and we'll catch you next time.